All right, so let's get into some NFL news. We're going to get into the coaching carousel as it is right now. We are going to jump over to the playoffs and do a couple predictions. So, first off, let's start with the big news, and that's Ron Rivera, who is the first coach to be hired this offseason, formerly of the Carolina Panthers and now head coach of the Washington Redskins. So the Redskins, of course, let go Jay Gruden in the middle of the season, which is stupid. And they also let go their GM, I believe. And so pretty quickly they had Ron Rivera in and they wanted to make him the coach. I know he had his press conference today. I haven't watched it, but a lot of people assume the same thing I kind of talked about when I was discussing my Chicago Bears, and that's that you want to bring in a guy that can establish a culture that can make things more mature, make things more serious, and get players to play hard. And that seems to be what they want. For whatever reason, whether it was a rift between Gruden and the front office or Gruden and the rest of the staff, whatever it may be, they just felt like the team didn't have any cohesion, didn't have any professionalism. And so they wanted to get a veteran head coach that could take some young players and really get them in the correct mindset. Now, this is the same thing I talked about, and I'm sure people will hate hearing this, but it's the truth. When John Fox took over the Chicago Bears, everybody remembers the laughingstock years with Trestman and Mel Tucker and all that. And while we didn't win a whole lot of games with John Fox, the culture completely changed. We're not where we are at this point last year or this year without John Fox, because John Fox had to completely change, or maybe I should say the defense, but John Fox had to completely change the culture. And although we didn't win a lot of games, our average margin of the average margin of victory against us was less than 3 points in his first two seasons. So it's just like, look, people can say what they want because all they want to do is look at records, but that stuff matters when it comes to hiring a coach, because you're talking about the difference of competing and not winning games. And back then we had defenses in the wrong gaps. We had the same players in the same gaps. We didn't even know gap responsibility as a defense when we had Mel Tucker and Trestman. That's a completely different level of professionalism in competing. You can't compete when you have a team that far off balance. And so bringing in Ron Rivera isn't going to be, a miracle worker, but it's definitely going to change the culture and it's going to get things back on track. And, that was one that I was hoping. So I think they got a lot of pieces offensively and defensively. He's got a 5-year contract, but we know those contracts don't always mean anything. But we'll see what happens. I think it's a good fit. I think you're in the NFC East where there's definitely going to be an opportunity to start making moves pretty soon, because not everybody's super competitive. And I think you got a nice roster. And I think they're young enough where you can't really mold their professionalism going forward. So I like that hire. All right, so next up, you got Pat Shurmer fired from the New York Giants. And look, I told you, this is what I said last year. I know he had 2 seasons, but I said it last year. And I've been saying it forever, not forever, but since this whole trend of reactionary culture, that all the coaches that you sit here in the offseason and start applauding is going to be the same coach getting fired the next season. I said that last year, and I've been saying it for a while. Like, this whole idea, and this is just me railing against it, this whole idea of, okay, your unit performed well, okay, let's go grab them as a head coach. I've said this in one of the community posts. I'm like, it's almost like these owners and GMs just pull up the stats page on NFL.com, look at who's highly ranked and says, who's the coordinator? Let's go interview them. That's how it feels. And look, I get it. It means something when your unit's doing well, but this is not good due diligence. This is not. I mean, when you go down the list of coaching candidates, it's always these coordinators that happen to be hot right now. even if they're coordinators who've been head coaches and failed miserably before. It's just like, oh, they're doing hot right now, so yeah, we got to go get them. And it makes me laugh. And now it's getting worse because now college coaches are becoming more the norm inside of the coaching circles, as far as the candidates, and it's just stupid. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it'll change, but it's hilarious. So Pat Shurmur, I mean, look, 2 seasons isn't enough time. You brought in a rookie quarterback. Saquon wasn't able to be healthy this year, and you know he's your focal point. And that defense is piss poor as far as talent. So this was just an absolutely silly firing. And it's not that I don't think coordinators can become good head coaches. Obviously they can. But it's just when you give them no time on top of it, it's dumb. The trend of all these coaching carousels is dumb to fire people really fast. So Pat Shurmur, I think he could have made a good head coach eventually. And I know he's had those stints before, but he's going to be very sought after as an offensive coordinator. All right, so the big one, the Cleveland Browns let go Freddie Kitchens, and this is sad. This is really sad. And this in a nutshell is what I argue with some fans about. Is you got these owners, right? And people love raging against owners. They're like, hey, as an owner, you come out here and say, we're going to find this person and we're going to find the right person to do this. But you're the same one that said last year, this is the right person, and then you're firing him. And so you made the mistake, they get fired, and then you get to keep making the choice. It's like, what makes me have confidence in your ability to choose? That's the same thing I argue with fans about, because fans will say something about somebody, and oh, he sucks. As soon as they put up some stats, oh, he's great. Like, why do we trust your evaluation? You always wrong. You just go with whatever is happening right now. So as a owner, they're like, this is a great coach, 6-10. This isn't a good coach. Let's go find a great coach. What makes me think you know how to find a great coach? So it's unfortunate. Now, Freddie Kitchens should have never been promoted to the head coaching position. And like he was a running backs position coach. I mean, I talk about my Chicago Bears. That's one of the points of reference. You got Matt Nagy with very little experience, and I've talked about how that has really hurt him as a head coach. And so you're talking about a guy who hasn't even been a coordinator and went straight up to head coach because of his relationship with Baker Mayfield. That was a dumb move to begin with. Now, I understand this firing, even though I don't like coaches like getting 1 year. That's absolutely ridiculous. But I understand this firing because they made the mistake. You don't promote somebody to head coach from a position coach just because they have a connection with the quarterback. Like, look, the quarterback is the most important position on the field. I get it. That's been that way for a long time. But the emphasis that people have started to put on quarterbacks is ridiculous. Who's the last quarterback that has legitimately been great for a while? Besides Tom Brady, you know, the legends like Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, Big Ben, well, Eli, I don't know if you call him a legend, but after that group, who's been that last quarterback? Matt Ryan, people up and down on him every year. I still think he's a really great quarterback. Of course, you got Drew Brees, but he's older than Phillip Rivers. But who's that great quarterback that's been great? You get all this ammunition, all this talk, all this media flair for a quarterback, and how long does it last? It was Jared Goff plays 7 games his rookie year with a horrible team, and everybody bust. He's a bust. Really? Then McVay comes in. Oh my God, Goff is so great. McVay is so great. Next year, oh wow, maybe Goff isn't good. It's like y'all can't make up y'all mind. You don't know how to evaluate. You got Pat Mahomes has 2 amazing years for where he came in. So we'll wait to see. Let's see if he can continue to ride that out. Deshaun Watson is okay. I'll see how he does in the playoffs. That'll really help me. Lamar burst on the scene this year. Of course, nobody's going to think he could ever do anything wrong until next year when he sucks. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe he was a bust. And so who's that long-lasting quarterback that you've seen? So all these people, like, we got to do what they did. We got to get a coach just to work with the quarterback. That has nothing to do with the head coaching job. You have to run the entire team. And you not just like X's and O's. You have to do everything. If you're not deep into football as a fan, I suggest you watch some of these documentaries in college. Because in college, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You talk about Jim Harbaugh would he take his team to like Rome or something for off-season training? You're talking about I'm talking about the way they paint the walls, the pictures they put up, every detail. You are the executive of the team. It's not just picking plays or looking at practice or watching. You have to do everything. And you think somebody who was just a running back coach can do that? And you think you could just bring somebody in because the quarterback likes them? It's crazy. And I'm not just singling out the Browns, but it's the rest of the NFL doing this. Because, again, you look at some of these candidates that are going to be up for head coaching jobs and the reasoning behind it. If I'm an owner and the GM's bringing this to me, the reasoning is so flimsy, I would have to fire my GM. Like, there's no due diligence. And it's not that, as I said, as a coordinator who's doing well, doesn't mean you might not be ready for a head coach job. But you performing well as a unit is not reason enough alone for you to be a head coach. It's just not. And so, sticking with the Browns, unfortunately, this is something I've talked about for a while, and I want to reiterate a little bit. And unfortunately, the Browns are backing me up on this, so maybe I'm wrong. But I've always said this, and I don't care. I stick by it. I think the head coach, I think they've always had it backwards. This whole get the GM to pick the head coach makes no sense to me. What does the GM do? The GM, you're talking about the financials, the cap, and they have capologists. Trust me, they got a whole bunch of people that run those numbers. They're not looking at those numbers every day, but they have an idea of the decisions that they got to make. So there's that. Then there's the scouting part, the pro scouting. They need to know who's coming up on free agency, what type of players might they be interested in. And some teams do a lot better job than that than others. Some people, you can tell, don't really keep a tab on that throughout the year. Then the other big part is the college scouting part. And you got huge scouting departments, and some people are good at the draft. We know all that. So that's what the GM does. You acquire the roster in all facets. And the head coach, as I mentioned, has to execute everything else. So if you want to put in simple terms, the head coach is the chef and the GM is the person getting the groceries. So unless this is a cooking competition show, why is the person dictating the groceries for the chef to cook instead of the chef telling you what type of groceries they want? Now, in the best ran systems, of course, they have a good synergy. They're on the same page as far as what type of players they want. But still, at the end of the day, the GM is responsible for getting the players. Why does that evolve into you picking the head coach? How does you picking players even know? How does that give you the skill set to know what a head coach should do, what a head coach should know, what a head coach should feel like, what they should bring to the table? What in the talent evaluation and talent gathering portion, what skill set does that give you to tell a coach how to coach? And so for me, I've always said, you should get the head coach first. First of all, the head coach is the face of the franchise, all that stuff. As the owners, you should feel comfortable with who you're bringing in to represent your organization, 100%. Outside of that, whoever your people that you trust, and even if you need a search committee, whatever, they should all be able to sit down and from a philosophical standpoint, understand what their head coach is bringing and say, we like what they're talking about. We like the evidence they're showing. We like the ideas they have. We want to bring him in. And then from there, and I'm not even saying the head coach should pick the GM, but the head coach should be involved in that GM process because I'm the one that has to execute. You're the one that just gets the resources, but you're not executing it. And execution is more important. So I need to feel comfortable with you as a person that you can gather and do the things that I need you to do for me to execute. Why is it backwards? Why is it that the GM is like, okay, I'm going to gather the resources. Now let me help pick the person that's going to execute. It makes no sense to me. I'm gathering resources. What, you just looking for somebody that likes the type of players you like? I don't know. The GM to me has no requisite skill to pick a head coach. That's the way I've always felt. The head coach runs it. And that might be biased because I coach football, but that just to me, I mean, you look at it in any other lane, there's nobody giving coaches talent anywhere else. In high school, there's not a principal coming up to tell you, or athletic directors more likely to say, okay, here's the players you get to use this year. In college, there's no athletic director or any GM saying, hey, we're going to scout for you and we're going to recruit the kids and then we'll tell you who you get to sign. No, we're the ones coaching. We pick the players we know can execute the schemes. We pick the players with the attitudes to believe in the philosophies that we want, and that's what you do. You don't have somebody come in and say, here you go, make the best of it. And so that's the way I've always felt, but now the Browns are doing that. Not exactly, I mean, pretty much close, though. They said they're going to hire a head coach. The head coach is going to be part of the GM search process. The coach doesn't have the final say, but they have input. And then they said the GM and the head coach are both going to report to the owner. And I like that. That sounds great. That sounds exactly what I'm talking about. There shouldn't be no, the head coach reports to the GM. For what? Why does the GM have control over the head coach? It makes, like, in any, like, structural sense, please explain to me how that makes any sense. Because you scout pro in college, because you handle the cap, you get to be my boss? That makes no sense. So I like what the Browns are saying. They're both going to report equally to the owner. Now, here's the one problem I don't like with the Browns. The Browns said that they're still going to be married together. The owner made no sense here. He said, we're not going to have an arranged marriage. And then he said they're obviously going to be married up with each other, though. What? How is that different? But they're basically saying that they're tied together. To me, I would never do that. To me, that is the number one downfall with some of these teams. This whole, you're tied to this quarterback, or as a coach, you're tied to this quarterback. As a GM, you're tied to this coach. Okay, GM, you didn't draft that quarterback. You're not tied to the quarterback, but you're tied to the coach. Oh, you did draft the quarterback? Okay, you're just tied to the quarterback. You're not tied to the coach because you didn't hire the coach. Like, all that is dumb. Nobody's tied to anything. This is the epitome of surface level thinking. Just to say, well, the quarterback suck, GM must suck. Get out of here. Like, that is not how that works. You could evaluate the separate factors and understand, is it a GM problem? Is it a player problem? Or is it a coach problem? It's not all for one. There shouldn't be no marriage. Like, what's the point of them reporting equally if they're still married together? So if I'm the owner, I want to run it, or I got a chief executive officer or whoever, and they run it, you report to them separately. Separate meetings, so we can look at your performance on your level, not as a tandem. So anyway, that's me. Just kind of went off on that. So we'll see who the Browns end up getting, but a lot of noise is being made that they said they're not going to go straight for GM and then a coach. And that's something I've been preaching a long time. So we'll see how that works out. Lastly, Jason Garrett is probably leaving Dallas. So Jason Garrett has his contract ending pretty soon here in January. And so a lot of people are like, is he coming back? Is he not? From what I've read and listened to, it sounds like they're just going to let the contracts lapse and they're going to go their separate ways. So they don't have to say they technically fired him, because Jason Garrett's good friends with Jerry Jones and he's a beloved person in the Cowboy community. So I'm okay with that. It makes sense. You set up those contracts for a reason. So that seems like how that's going to play out for them. And apparently, I think they said like 19 coaches have their contracts lapsing as well. So I don't know if this was planned as a make it break it year. If so, that's pretty genius and a classy move where you say, okay, we're not firing everybody. We're just not asking you to come back. And there is a difference between those two. So that seems like how that's going to shake out. And look, I'm not too mad at that. It's been a long time and they just never got over that hump, and they still got talent. Now, if you didn't have talent, it would make no sense to get rid of them, but you got a lot of talent. So you want to put together a staff that you think can take advantage of that talent, and it's not a rebuild. And the same thing I was talking about with my Bears. I know I keep bringing them up, but I'm like, look, you got talent. If you bring in a new staff, that doesn't mean it's a rebuild. You're bringing in somebody you think could take advantage of that talent. And that's what the Cowboys are going to try to do. The one thing I will say, though, is whole idea about Troy Aikman as a GM. I meant to bring up Urban Meyer with the Browns as well. This trend is just disturbing to me. Let me just say that. It's just disturbing to me. Like this whole, let's just get a random player to be a GM. Like what background does he have to make you think he can be a GM? Like, even with Mike Mayock, I'm like, really? You got a guy from TV who's never had GM experience or any executive experience? But at least with him, you can understand that he knows what he's talking about coaching football. And I 100% agree with that. But with Troy Aikman, he played football and then he's been in the booth. So I just don't understand how those two correlate with each other. And so a lot of people, I'm sure, will bring up John Lynch. It's like, well, look at John Lynch. First of all, how many top round picks do they got on that D line? Oh man, look how many top round picks they did on the D line. You know why they did that? Because they were losing a lot. So there's that. But I understand this. I understand that a GM, first of all, a GM used to be and should be able to do all the functions. A GM nowadays does not have to. The money people make, the size of the staffs, guarantee you John Lynch is not crunching numbers. He's not probably even doing a lot with numbers. Guarantee you John Lynch probably isn't doing a whole bunch with contracts and negotiation and all these different things. People talked about John Lynch because they said he knows how to evaluate football. Okay. So with Troy Aikman, they're going to say the same thing. He knows how to evaluate football players. Now, I'm not saying that's not a good talent. As I said, Mike Mayock, that's the only thing that made me say, yeah, the Rams or the Raiders did a good move. But Mayock has a history of doing that. Where is the history of Lynch or of Aikman doing that? And so what are you leaning on to say they know how to evaluate players? Trust me, every player that plays football does not mean they know football. And just because they do know football doesn't mean they know how to coach it or teach it. And just because they know football doesn't mean they know how to evaluate players. It is not the same skill set. And so we don't know what's happening in San Francisco. We don't know what staff is doing what for John Lynch. We don't know if he's making even any decisions. He might have final say where they have complete staffs coming in, pitching and telling them their thoughts, and then he gets the pick and he does no work. We don't know. It could be like that for all we know. And so Dallas has no guarantee that they could replicate what they're doing in the 49ers. And guess what? The 49ers took a long time to get to where they are now. And we still have to see if they're for real or not. And so I don't get it. Like the whole, I get that the Cardinals were okay. And I think mostly because Kyler Murray's pretty good. And Chandler Jones almost set an NFL record for sacks. That also helps. But you hired a fired college coach to be your head coach. Not just a coach, your head coach. He just got fired. You're trying to get Urban Meyer, who claimed he was retiring and too sick to be at Ohio State. And now people want to get him as an NFL head coach to lead men when he has never coached in the NFL. It is a different beast. And when you get 18-year-olds out of high school and you look at them with all these rings and say, I'm the man here, I'm in charge. It's very different to do that than to come into the NFL with no NFL credibility and say, I'm the man, I'm in charge. They're going to run over Urban Meyer. You have people that might respect him, that play for him, or you heard things, but he has no cachet, no clout in the NFL. And then you got all these other people at Baylor and all these other coaches that just have high-flying college offenses being asked to, again, lead the entire team. Not run an offense, lead the entire team. You got NFL analysts and former players that people want to be GMs. Look, you hire Ed Reed, Rod Woodson, Mike Singletary, some of these people to come be coaches. I get that. They do well and they get elevated to coordinators. I get that. They've coached for a while and they want to move to the scouting department. I get that. They move up to become executives, some type of GMs. I get that. When you just sit in a booth and call games and you're like, I could be the GM. There's no more roadmap anymore. That's just what 2020 and 2019, and that's what we've become. There's no earning anything. There's no actually having skill set. It's all about having a name. It's just about having a name, and that doesn't equal to much. So, all right. So anyway, let's wrap this up with the playoff predictions. We went kind of long here. I was going to go all the way through the Super Bowl, but that makes no sense. Let's just predict the wild card games this week. So we got the Bills at the Texans. That's a tough one. Those two teams I really don't believe in. I believe a lot more in the Bills defense, but I believe a lot more in the Texans quarterback, and they have the home field advantage. I don't know, man. The Texans been spotty, but because of the home field advantage, and I don't know that Josh Allen is going to be able to play quarterback, I got to take the Texans. Titans at the Patriots, I got to take the Patriots. It's not that the Titans aren't good. I think they could do it, but I think the Patriots going to get it together. I'm not betting against them. Vikings at the Saints, got to take the Saints. I honestly right now have the Saints going to the Super Bowl, so they're really hot, a lot of offensive weapons. NFL or the NFL playoffs are about quarterback play. Got to take Breeze, and the Vikings would have to do a whole lot to beat the Saints. Not only would they have to slow Breeze down and get turnovers, but then they're going to have to play against that really good Saints defense as well. And then Seahawks at Eagles. I'm taking the Seahawks. Don't trust the Eagles at all. I mean, Seahawks are really good. Now, the Seahawks can be hot and cold, but I think playoff time, they're going to really turn it on. So For me, I got Texans winning, Patriots winning, Saints winning, Seahawks winning. So all the home teams except the Seahawks. So, all right, so that's it for me. Appreciate you listening. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about any of those topics. Share it around, get the conversation started. And until next episode.